Ladies and gentlemen, seekers and builders of inner kingdoms, there is within you a figure you've forgotten, a silent, powerful archetype buried beneath layers of conditioning, fear and self-doubt. You chase success, you crave clarity, you want freedom, and yet something pulls you back. You work harder, but the goalpost moves. You learn more, but wisdom feels just out of reach. Why? Because the part of you designed to carry the torch, to break patterns, to lead, to transform, is asleep. I'm not talking about motivation or hustle. I'm talking about a deep identity, an inner figure you've exiled, because it once scared you, or because society labeled it too much, too wild, too intense. But this hidden archetype is the one holding the key to your breakthrough. It is the architect of vision, the warrior of integrity, the sage of discernment, and the alchemist of meaning. It is the part of you that knows exactly what to do when you stop listening to noise and start remembering who you are. You do not need to find this archetype. You only need to unseal the chamber in which you locked it. And once you do, you'll stop chasing. You'll start embodying. The shadow blocks the gate. There is a reason why you keep circling the same patterns, hitting the same invisible wall, no matter how much effort or strategy you pour into your goals. It's not because you're incapable or unworthy. It's because you're standing at the gate, and the gate is locked from the inside. What bars your way isn't something external. It is your shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It isn't something to be banished. It is simply the parts of you that you've been taught not to see, the emotions you were told to suppress, the instincts you were taught to fear, the talents that didn't fit the mold you were placed in. Over time, these unclaimed pieces of you formed a psychic wall, and now they guard the threshold to everything you want. That threshold leads to your power, your purpose, your highest contribution. But you cannot pass through until you turn and face the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is not a monster. It is you, forgotten, ignored, disowned. Every time you get close to a breakthrough, when a new opportunity arises, when inspiration strikes, when someone sees your potential, your shadow emerges. Not to punish you, but to protect you from the unknown. It whispers the same messages you heard growing up. Don't get too big. Don't take up space. Don't speak unless you're sure. Don't shine too brightly. And in that moment, your forward momentum collapses. You find excuses. You delay. You doubt yourself. And the gate remains closed. The tragedy is not that the shadow is there. The tragedy is that you mistake it for truth. Your shadow holds not just the darkness, but the gateway to your wholeness. Inside your rage is clarity. Inside your fear is your hunger for life. Inside your envy is a compass pointing toward your own unlived potential. But as long as you avoid these feelings, they continue to act as unconscious saboteurs, blocking the archetype you're meant to activate. The archetype, your inner sovereign, creator, healer, warrior, needs access to your full energy, and that energy is tied up in what you repress. You can't selectively numb. When you bury shame, you bury passion. When you avoid anger, you mute your boundaries. When you suppress grief, you dilute your love. The key to unlocking the gate is not found in bypassing pain. It's found in turning toward it with reverence. This doesn't mean becoming overwhelmed by your shadow. It means integrating it. It means making space to listen to what your resistance is trying to protect. It means being honest about the roles you've played to survive, and deciding if those roles are still worth carrying. When you begin to relate to your shadow with curiosity instead of condemnation, the dynamic shifts. The gate no longer feels like a punishment. It becomes a sacred test. Are you willing to embrace the full spectrum of who you are? You cannot activate your inner archetype while denying your shadow, because the archetype is forged from the very fire the shadow tries to hide. They are two parts of the same being. When you step into the fullness of your identity, light and dark, strength and softness, you become someone who no longer waits for permission. You become someone who holds the key. And when that happens, the gate doesn't just open, it disappears, because you realize it was never separate from you. It was your own reflection, asking to be seen. The inner rebel is not your enemy. There's a part of you that always resists. It says no when everyone expects yes. It pulls back when you're supposed to push forward. It whispers doubts when you try to commit. This part has been labeled lazy, defiant, inconsistent, or even self-destructive. But the truth is, it's none of those things. It is the inner rebel, and contrary to what you may have been taught, it is not your enemy. The inner rebel exists because somewhere along the way, you were told how to be, what to believe, what was acceptable, what was too much. Slowly you learned to shape yourself, to survive, through approval, compliance, perfectionism, or silence. You became what others needed you to be, often at the cost of your deeper truth. But a part of you never agreed to those terms. That part, your rebel, refused to die. It hid, waited, and what? Now, when you try to move forward in a direction that isn't truly aligned, toward a goal that isn't yours, in a role that isn't right, following a script you never wrote, that rebel comes out, not to ruin your progress, but to protect your integrity. This is where many people mistake the rebel for sabotage. But sabotage is mindless destruction. The inner rebel is precise. It only disrupts what it senses is false. It only blocks what it knows will cost you more than it will give. But because we're taught to fear resistance, to suppress discomfort, to keep going no matter what, we ignore its signals. We label it as procrastination. We shame ourselves for lack of discipline, and we double down on control. The problem is, you cannot control what is asking to be heard. You cannot silence a part of you that is trying to save your soul. If you want to reclaim your momentum, your clarity, your power, you have to stop fighting the rebel and start listening to it. Ask, what are you protecting me from? What part of this plan, this relationship, this dream doesn't feel true? Where am I abandoning myself just to be accepted or admired? The rebel's resistance is often a signal that you're out of alignment, that you're trying to perform a role you've outgrown, that you're chasing success in a form that no longer resonates with your values, or that you're working towards something that was never truly yours to begin with. The rebel doesn't want less for you. It wants more, but it wants it on your terms. And there's another side to the rebel we rarely acknowledge. It's creative power. The inner rebel is not just a destroyer of false paths. It is a builder of new ones. It's the part of you that dares to say, this isn't working, there must be another way. That voice may sound like dissent, but it is the beginning of sovereignty. It is the spark of originality, the birthplace of innovation, the seed of liberation. The rebel sees through illusion. The rebel sees through illusion. It remembers your essence. It wants a life that fits your soul, not just your resume. If you treat it like a problem, it will keep working against you. If you treat it like a guide, it will lead you back to your truest path. So when resistance shows up, don't panic. Don't punish yourself. Pause. Get quiet. Ask what deeper truth you've been ignoring. The rebel may not use polite language. It may speak in frustration, fatigue, or even numbness, but beneath the noise, it's offering you a gift. The chance to build a life where you no longer need rebellion, because everything in it is chosen, real, and yours. The inner rebel isn't here to destroy your progress. It's here to make sure you don't succeed at becoming someone you're not. The dormant king or queen waits for command. There is a figure within you that holds immense authority, not the kind given by titles, applause, or status, but the kind that radiates from within and organizes your life around truth, clarity, and purpose. This figure is the king or the queen, not in the fairy tale sense, but as the sovereign archetype that governs your inner world. And right now it is dormant, not absent, not broken, just waiting for you to remember that it exists, waiting for you to step up and give it command. Most people live as subjects in their own inner kingdom, ruled by fears, doubts, old wounds, and external expectations. They wait for permission to act, for someone else to validate their direction, or for circumstances to align perfectly before they claim their power. And so the sovereign within them sleeps, because sovereignty is not something that finds you. It is something you activate. This inner ruler is not loud. It does not beg for your attention. It waits in stillness. You may catch glimpses of it in moments of deep alignment, when you're speaking your truth without apology, making decisions without second guessing, or standing up for something that matters to you without flinching. In those moments, the sovereign rises. But the moment you hand your authority over to fear or doubt, it retreats again. The truth is, the king or queen within you cannot rule without your command. It needs you to claim the throne of your life, deliberately, not passively. That means taking radical responsibility for how you spend your time, who you allow into your inner circle, what values you live by, and what vision you are building toward. Without this intentionality, your life is run not by the sovereign but by the shadow court, the inner critic, the wounded child, the fearful voice pretending to be practical. What keeps the sovereign dormant is not a lack of worthiness, but a lack of structure. Sovereignty is not just about inspiration or charisma. It thrives on order. A true king or queen builds systems to protect their energy, to steward their time, to stay in alignment with their deepest values. They do not allow chaos to reign, because they know chaos dilutes power. But don't mistake this for control. The sovereign is not a tyrant. It doesn't demand obedience. It earns it through inner alignment. It doesn't suppress emotion. It integrates it. It doesn't fear the unknown. It prepares for it with wisdom and grace. Where the inner child seeks safety, the sovereign creates it. Where the rebel wants truth, the sovereign turns that truth into structure and legacy. To awaken this dormant force, you must start acting like it already exists. Speak with more intention. Set boundaries that reflect your worth. Create space for silence and reflection. Stop outsourcing your choices to people who do not have to live with the consequences. You do not have to feel ready to do this. Readiness is not a prerequisite for sovereignty. Choice. The king or queen within you is not perfect, not immune to fear, not above pain, but they are unwavering in their commitment to meaning. They do not serve ego, they serve vision. And they are tired of waiting. Every time you defer to indecision, to noise, to distraction, you deny the throne. But the moment you say, I will lead, even imperfectly, you wake them, you let them rise, and everything around you begins to reorient. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The dormant sovereign within you is not a fantasy. It is your truest form, but it cannot act until you stop waiting for someone else to rule your life, command it, or continue to serve what you secretly resent. The sacred wound is the map. There is a wound inside you that you've spent years trying to ignore, fix, outrun, or bury. It might show up as a recurring pain, a fear you can't quite shake, a story that plays on repeat whenever you try to grow or change. You may think of it as a flaw, a weakness, something unfortunate that happened to you. But what if that wound wasn't a barrier to your destiny, but the map to it? The sacred wound is not just your pain, it is your origin story. It is the place where your soul encountered a rupture, where the world didn't meet you with the love or understanding you needed. Maybe it came as abandonment, betrayal, neglect, shame, or failure. Maybe it was loud and traumatic, or maybe it was quiet and invisible, like being seen, but never truly known. Either way, it carved a hollow space within you, but that space is not empty. It is potent. It holds direction. Most people spend their lives trying to move away from their wound. They build armor around it. They construct lives designed to never feel that pain again. They chase validation, success, or control, believing those things will finally close the hole. But the wound cannot be healed through avoidance. It does not ask to be sealed shut. It asks to be understood. The wound is sacred because it reveals what matters most to you. If your core pain is about being unheard, then your deepest longing might be to use your voice to help others find theirs. If your wound centers on abandonment, your purpose may lie in creating spaces of belonging. What hurt you most is not random. It is the key to what you are here to give. But until you stop avoiding the wound, you cannot access the power inside it. To walk the path of your sacred wound is not to wallow in it. It is to make it conscious, to ask, what did this teach me about the world, about love, about myself, and how has it shaped my choices, my identity, my work? Only then can you begin to separate the pain from the narrative. Only then can you see the mythic shape of your life. Your wound is the part of you that never stopped hope, that still wants to trust, to connect, to create, to be whole. It's the place where you first learned what it means to care, to feel, to yearn. That depth is not weakness, it's wisdom. The sacred wound turns pain into empathy, shame into purpose, and loss into vision. It makes your journey uniquely yours. Without it, your story would have no arc, no depth, no power to touch others. But here's the truth most people miss. The sacred wound does not stay a wound. When honored, it becomes the forge. It burns away illusion. It teaches humility and strength in equal measure. It softens you without breaking you. And most of all, it reveals what you are truly here to embody, not as a performance, but as a lived truth. You do not need to be fully healed to begin this work. You just need to stop pretending the wound doesn't matter. You need to be willing to feel what you've pushed down for too long, to speak of it not with shame, but with reverence. Because in naming it, you take back your power, and in walking with it, you find the thread that ties every piece of your story together. The sacred wound is not your obstacle, it is your compass. It doesn't point away from pain, but toward meaning. It tells you, go there. That's where your medicine lives. That's where your gift comes from. And if you're brave enough to follow it, you won't just find healing, you'll find yourself. The inner alchemist transforms pain into power. Inside each of us lives a quiet force, often overlooked, often misunderstood. It is not loud or dramatic. It doesn't need recognition or applause, but it is always there, watching, waiting, gathering raw material from your life. This is the inner alchemist, the one who does not run from pain, but understands its deeper purpose, to be transformed into power. You were not meant to carry your wounds as well. You were meant to turn them into fuel. But most people never learn how. They either become consumed by their pain, repeating the same stories, cycling through blame and regret, or they try to numb it, to escape it, to pretend it doesn't matter. In both cases, the pain remains inert. It sits heavy in the psyche, growing toxic with time. The alchemist doesn't allow that. The alchemist steps into the fire. The inner alchemist knows that everything you've been through, every failure, heartbreak, rejection, mistake, contains something of value. Not because the suffering itself was noble, but because you are. Because your soul has the ability to distill meaning from chaos, to take what was meant to break you, and use it to rebuild something unshakable within you. This transformation doesn't happen all at once. It requires discipline, courage. The alchemist doesn't wait for pain to pass. They meet it directly. They sit with the discomfort and ask it what it's trying to They sort through the debris of broken dreams, missed chances, and emotional bruises, not to relive the past, but to retrieve the gold hidden in it. There is always gold, but it is only visible to the one willing to look beyond the surface. The alchemist understands that emotions are not enemies, they are ingredients. Anger becomes clarity, grief becomes compassion, fear becomes awareness, shame becomes humility. These are not easy conversions. They require you to be honest with yourself, to face what you've denied, and to reframe the narrative you've been living inside. But when you do, something changes. What once made you feel small begins to make you feel strong. Not because the pain is gone, but because you've changed your relationship to it. Power, in this sense, is not domination. It's not control over others. It's not bravado. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've survived, what you thought you couldn't. That you faced your own darkness and learned to carry light through it. That nothing inside you is wasted, not even the parts you once hated. The alchemist doesn't discard anything, they repurpose it. They understand that your story, with all its imperfections and contradictions, is not broken, it's sacred, and the more fully you embrace it, the more fully you step into your potential. Pain can limit you only when you refuse to engage it, but once you let it teach you, it becomes a source of depth, resilience, and wisdom. This is not a one-time event. The alchemist works continuously as new challenges arise, as new wounds appear. The process repeats, but each time it becomes a little easier. You trust the fire more, you fear the darkness less. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can I make from this? That shift is everything. You don't need to be perfect to activate the alchemist. You just need to be willing to see your life not as a series of accidents, but as a source of sacred material. Willing to believe that your pain is not the end of the story, but the beginning of your transformation. The inner alchemist doesn't promise comfort, but it does promise power, the kind that can't be taken from you, because it wasn't given to you. You made it yourself. Activation begins with naming. There is a quiet moment, often missed, often dismissed, where transformation begins. It doesn't start with a dramatic change or a sudden breakthrough. It begins with something much simpler, much more profound, naming. To name something is to bring it into the light, to give it shape, identity, and play. What you do not name remains in the shadows, influencing your choices, your emotions, your life, without your awareness or permission. Activation, true inner awakening, always begins here. As long as something remains unnamed, it cannot be seen clearly. You may feel restless, stuck, angry, anxious, or unfulfilled, but without naming the source, all your energy gets spent reacting to symptoms. You try to fix your habits, push harder, stay positive, hustle forward, but nothing sticks, because the root remains hidden. Naming cuts through the fog. It gives you a reference point. It says, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm avoiding, this is the shape of my fear, this is the truth I haven't wanted to speak. Naming is not labeling in the shallow sense. It is not about boxing yourself in or creating fixed identity. It's about creating conscious relationship with your inner world. If you do not name your grief, you will call it fatigue. If you do not name your anger, you will call it stress. If you do not name your longing, you will call it confusion. And in doing so, you stay disconnected from what those emotions are actually trying to tell you. The act of naming is the act of reclaiming. It means saying, this is what's here, and I am willing to face it. When you do this, you shift from being controlled by your inner experience to becoming a conscious participant in it. The moment you name the pattern, people-pleasing, perfectionism, self-sabotage, you create space between you and it. You are no longer just inside the behavior, you are observing it. That gap is where transformation begins. You cannot activate your inner archetypes, your sovereign, your creator, your warrior, your healer, while your inner world remains vague. They need language to come forward. Naming is how you summon them. When you say, I am carrying rage, you invite the warrior to step in. When you say, I feel lost, you invite the guide. When you say, I've been silencing my voice for approval, you invite the sovereign to rise. There is a reason ancient traditions placed so much power in names. To name something was to claim relationship to it, to acknowledge its presence, to call it into form. The same is true of your inner life. If you want to change, you have to be willing to see, and to see, you have to name. This is why so much stays stuck in the unconscious, because naming requires honesty. It requires slowing down, listening, and confronting truths that may be uncomfortable or painful. But what is more painful in the long run, facing the truth, or continuing to live disconnected from your own power? Naming is not the end of the journey, but it is always the first step. It doesn't solve everything, but it opens the door to possibility. Once something has a name, you can sit with it, speak to it, learn from it, and eventually choose how to respond to it. Without naming, you remain in the dark, fighting what you cannot see. So start simple. Don't wait for the perfect words. Just be honest. Say what's true. Name what name what longs. Name what hides. In doing so, you begin the process of alchemy. You begin the process of becoming known to yourself. And in that naming, something ancient stirs. The dormant begins to awaken, and the path forward, once hidden, reveals its shape.